We continue our series of sermons on resonance and dissonance between various religious traditions and our own. Today it's shamanism, a little different than some of the traditions we've looked at because that religion or religions were formed earlier in humanity's history than were, let's say, Islam or Buddhism, in another era, another worldview. But as we come to understand how we interact with this set of religions or these spiritual principles, let us read from the Gospel according to Matthew, first 11 verses of chapter 4. Would you listen as the Spirit of God brings a word to you? Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted 40 days, 40 nights. And afterwards he was famished, exhausted, torn down. The tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But Jesus answered, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." So then the devil took him up to the holy city and placed him on the very pinnacle of the temple, said to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, God will command God's angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up so that you will not dash your foot against a stone." And Jesus said to him, "Again it is written, do not put Adonai your God to the test." So again the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all of the kingdoms of the world and all their splendor. And the devil said to Jesus, "All these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me." But Jesus said to him, "Away with you, Satan, for it is written, worship Adonai your God, and serve only Adonai your God." Then the devil left him, and suddenly angels came and waited upon him. Hear what the Spirit is saying to our church.
Thanks be to God.
This is one of those sermons, probably ought to come with a warning label. Pastor has been, dealing with emotional turmoil in his family for weeks on end. I have been struck in these last weeks by how often we veil the realities of what can be an extraordinarily painful world. And we need to, really. We can't be constantly staring at the vagaries of human existence, a world that throws or interrupts our lives with awful disease, or a world that throws us relationships that become undermined and crack apart so that our own security, our own way of looking at ourselves begins to falter and fall, where economic stability seems to be something that just hangs right on the brink. I mean, the world throws us a great deal of pain. Many parts of the world, there's wars. Here, rumors of wars. I'm just impressed with how often we lay a veil over all that, push it away so that we can move forward, so that we can live our life not constantly in fear of what comes next, what painful thing the world will bring to us. Of course, when we are confronted with the reality of those painful moments, when we're confronted with our own mortality, when we are confronted with that deep sense of loss that comes when we mourn the death of someone who is close, when we're confronted by those things, well then we cannot avoid the reality of the pain in the world, and we look for some kind of healing in the midst of all that. It's real. Now, what the ancients believed, you see, is all those things that come at us, the interruptions of a tragic illness, the grief that comes, the horrifying parts of losing your livelihood. The ancients believed that those were symptoms of something deeper going on in the world. The ancients believed that those things were symptoms of what was real sickness, the disruption between what is essentially you, call it the soul, and what is God, what operates and opens the world before us. So when the ancients talked about healing a sickness, they were talking about healing the underlying cause, helping us to deal with what's beyond the veil, underneath the things that hurt us. And whether or not a person was healed of the symptom was a separate question than whether we were brought in to the healing of our soul, being connected to and at one with God. It was certainly true for the Christians. We have a number of stories that indicate that in the Gospels. When Jesus heals a blind man, it's very difficult to tell whether he's actually healing blindness or whether Jesus is trying to heal the blindness of people's souls that don't see the presence of God in the justice that should flow out into the world. Always the two are inextricably intertwined in the gospel messages. Anytime I preach a miracle story about a healing, inevitably there's one side that has that underneath character of healing to it, not just the symptoms. It's true of shamanism as well. For the shamans, it's a question of reaching down into those underlying causes, allowing us to be healed and brought through to the other side of a crisis, to go behind the veil. Now, shamanism is a religion, or I say set of religions, because it's really a kind of a spiritual movement that was brought about before the mythic religions. This was in magical times. Now, strictly speaking, I understand that in Central Asia is really the center of where shamanism is, but the basic tenets of shamanistic visions and shamanistic cultures can be found all over the world. The American Indians, in India, in Europe, they have certain earmarks. Right? And one of the ways that it works is a shaman is someone who early on has a formative vision and illness. Someone who becomes really a wounded healer, someone who is torn apart in the spirit world and then built back together so that this person knows how to deal with what's beyond the veil, knows how to guide and lead those who are dealing with what's horrifying and painful beyond the veil, so that they might be healed, carry them through, become at one with spirit. That's what shamanism in many ways is about. Isn't it curious that this vision I read about here in Matthew has many of the earmarks of a shamanistic vision? You know, a challenge that has to do with later in life. Because the temptations that Jesus went through in the gospel, according to Matthew, were temptations that formed and set his character for that moment in life when he would deal with the depth of the spiritual horrors, when he would be crucified and then risen again, built back together. There's a shamanistic edge to this. It's as though the Christian religion picked up on some of those themes. Now, the interesting things when we look at shamanism and Christian healing and all that kind of thing is people sometimes, start believing in magic again when we talk about it. That's a lot of what happened in the New Age movement. You know, it's like we kind of got to a point where we understand there's no magic in the world, that things work according to a set of physical laws. And then we we kind of get beyond that and we say, oh, we're being silly. We've thrown the baby out with the bathwater, and the next thing you know, you have people sort of believing in magic again, believing that all kinds of things may work with spirits and so on and so forth. And that's not me when I look at shamanism. That's what I call a pre-trans fallacy. That's transcendent. We've transcended the magic of the world. All right? And it's a fallacy to go back and deny what modernist has taught us about healing, about spirit, about the way things work in the world. And yet, nevertheless, the experience of people, the deep spiritual intuition of all those shamans, of Jesus, of the Christians that followed, that deep spiritual intuition, nevertheless, is touching something that is real and true. And that is that when we are confronted with the things that are beyond the veil, when we are confronted by the pain and the struggle of a difficult world, if we open ourselves to the presence of spirit, we can be guided through those places and brought to a place of strength and beauty. It's the nature of things in a world that throws a great deal of pain our way. It's a painful world, 'tis true. But the presence and the power of a healing God is something that we can touch and hang on to. Does it heal the physical symptoms? Does it simply paper over the grief you may feel or the fear that you have? No. But what happens is your heart breaks open at moments of pain. And the Spirit of God can carry you through those moments to a moment of greater healing. You know, that's what we offer here. Not an unrealistic gospel, one that denies the pain that the world throws our way. No. No, what we offer to the world around us is a very real spirit that operates in a very real world. Jesus, later in the Gospel of Matthew, charged his disciples to go out into the world and to heal. Heal the sick. Heal those who have received that horror and that pain, who are looking to move beyond, who are sick because the symptoms show that they are separated by the presence of God. And so we're called to go out and heal the sick. How? Do we pray? Do we look for magic to happen? I don't think so. I know how Jesus did. Over and over and over again in the Gospels, what happened is Jesus would have compassion. You remember my favorite Greek word? Splanchnizomai. Have compassion. It's almost a word that it sounds like. You know, it comes from deep in the gut. Had compassion, connected to them from a place of deep yearning, from that essential you kind of place. Because when we connect to people in that way, we can carry them, help them move to a place of greater healing and greater beauty. It's what the Spirit of God offers us. It's what the Spirit of God has been offering long before anybody heard of Jesus. And what the Spirit of God will continue to offer the world when nobody has heard of Jesus again. Our hope is built upon that rock-solid foundation that when we are in pain and our heart breaks open, the presence of God will heal.